Hey friends, we're going to start off with talking a little bit about digital ID and why it's problematic. One of the things that is happening around the world is governments that are calling for digital ID. And I'm just going to run through a few important news stories. So stay tuned, make sure to like the video, comment, and let me know in the comments. Do you like tutorial videos more, or do you like coverage of important technology and privacy security topics? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments on this. I think these kinds of topics are extremely important today and for the future, and if we're going to ever hold any influence in our future, we need to understand technology security and privacy. Utah wants age verification. They're going to use digital identification in order to perform the age verification, and they say it's to protect children, but just remember, just as things like mass surveillance didn't stop terrorists, just as I've used the analogy in the past, if you give a baker ingredients to bake a cake, eventually that baker is going to bake a cake. Well, the same goes for this technology. If you continually build technology that can be taken advantage of to create a totalitarian state, eventually you will end up with exactly that. And that's a big reason and motivation for my doing these videos, because I think this information is so important to get out, the warnings, and also to show people how to protect themselves in an increasingly changing environment landscape. Another agenda that is happening right now is the CBDCs and the studies going on around the world to try and finance the innovation, implementation, and possibly even the forced usage of central bank digital currencies. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but I think it's important enough, whether this video gets seen or not, that people understand what this will cost your freedom, your privacy, everything. So let's hear it from the man himself at the Bank for International Settlements. What exactly does CBDC provide, Mr. Augustin Karstens?
And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability, and also we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
So you heard it yourself, and they will also have full control over how that money is spent, how you're able to. Of course, the World Economic Forum has been talking about this for quite a while. They have had a big push using their large fraternity of large banks and massive corporations around the world, and reminds me a little bit of a James Bond movie back in 2008 where the mastermind was actually pushing for saving the environment, but it was all part of a diabolical plan to take over the world. Check out that episode, or rather that movie of James Bond from 2008, and I think you'll see what I mean. Chatcontrol, what they will be able to do is actually scan image analysis. They want to be able to monitor your conversations locally on your phone, what they call CSAM, which is basically saying it's for the purpose of finding illegal activity that harms children. But we know that's not the case. We know it's going to be expanded. We know it's going to be abused. There is no excuse to force this on all people, to have all of their privacy violated. Even their encrypted messengers will have that stripped in the way that it will be checking locally for this material, if not breaking or forcing a downgrade in the type of encryption used. So chat control is a huge issue. Providers are going to have to work with the European Union for their services, and it may end up affecting you even if you don't live in the European Union. Of course, they claim it's to prosecute child exploitation, which is, it's a really disgusting tactic to use this in order to destroy encryption and people's privacy. It's a really low move, And it just shows the kinds of people that are behind these agendas, that they will go so far as to use children to manipulate the emotions of people around the world to get them to accept something that is totalitarian in nature. No other way to describe it. It is, in fact, totalitarian technology. And you can't call it anything else. I mean, it is definitively totalitarian technology. They also want to have network blocking, so they want to be able to block access to things. They want to screen your personal cloud storage, as I've mentioned in the past, to protect your human rights. Always encrypt your data before you upload to any cloud provider. And if you want, the best really way to have access to a cloud is to host your own Nextcloud or own cloud, something like that. And I've talked about this in previous videos as well. Check out the self-hosting playlist for more information on that. The reason we have access to so much true material is because there are people out there who are willing to speak out because they know they have methods to protect their anonymity, whether it's a whistleblower, a journalist working with a source. All of these things are dependent on privacy and, in some cases, anonymity. If there were, in fact, monitoring of all conversations everywhere and all activity everywhere with the ability to network block, amplify and de-amplify accounts, which is already happening. That's your social credit score. You're being amplified and de-amplified based on your actions online. And because of that, you can consider that a privatized social credit score, which will inevitably become linked into other things in so-called innovation, which, as I always mention, innovation is now done by finance. It's no longer by chance. Inventions are now being financed. There is an agenda, a direction that we are being steered to. And that agenda is not democratic at all. It's based on the financial industry, Wall Street, investments, or so-called national interests, so-called national security. But you have to look past that. You have to realize that, they really have no evidence of mass surveillance preventing any terrorism. You can look into this yourself. There's been several studies. You are more likely to be killed by falling furniture than a terrorist attack. And just consider that. How afraid are you of falling furniture on your head? I bet you don't think of it very often. But the media is able to really dig into the minds and the emotions of people to get them in fear and to get them to accept things they otherwise would never accept. And the important thing to mention is these things don't get rolled back. When they introduce these kinds of infrastructures and technologies, that doesn't go away. If anything, it becomes expanded, it becomes abused, and there's always going to be abuse. Where the boundaries are, we don't even know yet. And there really aren't any. And I know a lot of people have said that boundaries on artificial intelligence will, stifle innovation, but there really does need to be some regulation of it. Artificial intelligence can do so many things, from identifying users by the unique metadata, or identifying them by their speech patterns, by their typing sound even. So there's so many different ways. And with artificial intelligence basically scraping everything on the web, I think we're going to see a lot more popularity of so-called dark nets and dark web. I think that's going to be the future in a lot of ways, just like other things that were early adopted by what was looked at as outside type of low activities, but then becomes innovated into the future of security and privacy. When you consider the fact that, it may have a bad reputation in some cases, but that's because it's so safe. That's because of the level of security and privacy things provide. And with artificial intelligence, it's never been more important to understand how to access things like Tor browser, how to access things like I2P network. And for that, I do recommend on Linux users, whether you have a Linux desktop, tablet, or a phone. Check out, I just created an automated installer for the I2P desktop, so it will create an automatic button on your desktop here, just like this, by hitting the install.sh, and all you need is LibreWolf installed and your choice of I2P, and then you'll be able to get started right away with I2P. So check that out. Creates the shortcut and everything, starts I2P router in the background, and even closes it for you when you close the browser. So that's something I have been working on to try and help with the denial of service attacks and also make it more convenient for people to first try I2P. Of course, I do suggest that users run an I2P router 24 hours a day if you're able to. That's going to be more reliable for you. It's also going to help the network more. It's not going to interrupt things as much. Now, the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner is even warning against Chatcontrol, which is, as we just discussed, the mass surveillance plan and law that they want to scan everything on your devices before it even gets encrypted. So keep that part in mind. Even if you have strong encryption enabled, this would allow the ability to scan from inside the app or from another scanning service on your device, and it'll force this on everyone. So the Human Rights Commissioner criticizes the envisioned message screening on private smartphones, the so-called client-side scanning, for undermining secure encryption. As I just discussed, it's going to completely destroy encryption and any usefulness of encryption. Without directly changing the encryption, the client-side scanning can still take effect, can take things like scraping of the text being shown on your phone, it can be taking screenshots, it can be doing countless other things. It's only limited by the creativeness of the developer and those in the planning and financing stages of this. It even makes security breaches more likely, which is a fact. The screening process can be manipulated, and of course it can also be fed bad data. And so there's countless false positives. For example, they have had, in the European Union, they found that predictive policing was actually finding European government officials as suspects. And what that predictive policing does is it's basically feeding an algorithm what they want. They can create probable cause out of thin air just by feeding it the right data. And so by relying on these systems, you destroy all of the rights that came before. I wanted to do this to make sure people were aware of some of the most important things that are happening right now. Close your eyes and imagine that for a few minutes. Imagine a world where everything that is said is monitored, cataloged, and shared with all different types of so-called authorities on the matter, and how that will affect your ability to speak the truth. And this is why I keep bringing up it being a post-truth world, and that was first coined at the World Economic Forum. A post-truth world is a world under mass surveillance. It's a world where everyone is being monitored 24 hours a day, where every word spoken is being monitored, cataloged, analyzed by artificial intelligence in order to categorize you as an individual. And can you see truth in that world? I do not see truth in that world. I'm motivated by getting this information out, information I think is the most important. I will see you guys later. I may do a video on the I2P desktop automated installer. I may also add additional automation to this. So stay tuned for that. If you want to keep up with everything, go to buymeacoffee.com/politictech/posts. Completely public for you to follow the blog. You don't have to ever buy me a coffee despite the domain name. And I will see you later, and we will talk more about technology, what's going on in the world, and how to protect your security and privacy.